much for coming to our first C3 Comp Career Catalyst of the 2024 season. Today we have some really exciting speakers focusing on global development and medical physics. So, before we begin, we just want to do a quick land acknowledgement for where we're originating from right now, which is in Victoria. And so today we'd like to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen people, the Songhees and Esquimalt, whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. But we'd like to encourage everyone to visit the website Whose Land to learn about which land your institution is situated on, because of course we're all coming from different places across Canada and the States. Also, we'd like to introduce ourselves, the Comp Student Council. We're an education subcommittee, and we do a variety of different works for medical physics across Canada. We advise the Comp Student Board through the Education Committee. We also assist Comp in attracting student members and retaining those student members by hosting a variety of different events, whether they're social, academic, or professional. Particularly, we host many events at the Comp Annual Scientific Meeting to help create a strong, healthy student community. If you're interested in those events, you can check them out at the Comp ASM every year. We've got Students' Night Out, Young Professionals Workshop, the Canadian Residency Fair, Science Spoken Succinctly, and we're also trying to host a student spotlight. So we'd like to share your publications, the work that you've been doing. So if you have friends in your lab, if you've recently published something that you're really proud of, we want to make sure that you get the recognition you deserve, that people see the work that the graduate students across Canada are doing. So let us know. We're happy to hear about what is going on in your lab. And of course, the Comp Career Catalyst seminars, which is what is going on today. Okay, so the Comp Career Catalyst seminar series is essentially a professional development series where we want to bring new and exciting information to students across Canada. We want to enhance your skills and develop knowledge for you guys to help you guys have more success in the future and hear about what's out there. And the next session, just like this one, is announced on social media and through our email. So you can sign up and we can get you registered to make sure that you are in the know. Also, there's past sessions on YouTube for a variety of different topics like AI, residencies, etc. So for today, right now, the opening remarks, but we're going to have 3 different awesome presentations, starting with a presentation from Dr. Parminder Basran, one from Dr. Shada Wadiwamahi, and one from Dr. Wilfred Nagua. And then we'll be followed with a panel discussion and Q&A, at which point anyone is welcome to either raise their hand and they can be asked to ask whatever questions or anything that they're interested in after hearing from our speakers. Or alternatively, you are more than welcome to put messages in the chat or message the moderators, myself and Chloe, directly. And then we'll end with closing remarks. Chloe would like to introduce our speakers.
Yes, thank you, Jane. So our first speaker is an associate research professor from the Cornell University College of Veterinary Medicine with a profound commitment to advancing healthcare globally. He currently contributes his expertise to the AAPM Global Data and Information Exchange Committee. Additionally, he plays a crucial role on the board of the Medical Physics for World Benefit by advocating for global access to healthcare. So everyone, I'm very pleased to present your first speaker, Dr. Parminder Basran. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thanks to this team for putting this together. I'm just blown away about the depth of support you guys are providing for your fellow students, and just think, boy, wouldn't it have been really awesome to have that kind of network and infrastructure and intense motivation that you students have back when I was doing my graduate study. So kudos to you guys for having such a great team and supporting each other. I think that's great. So the talk that I'm going to provide today, the idea behind it that was sort of thrown at us was to provide some insight into the diversity of practices and challenges in medical physics worldwide. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide sort of a concrete example of what healthcare looks like in another country and what might be some of the central challenges in delivering healthcare, and then try to connect that with medical physics. And then Another key point that was suggested that we chat about was how do we improve access to radiotherapy and the importance of global collaboration. So I'm going to provide an example of that primarily through the work that we've been doing with Medical Physics for World Benefit, and provide some things that we've been working on in that sense, and then I'll have a few concluding remarks. Let me share my screen and get into presentation mode. And just a quick thumbs up, you can see the talk. Perfect. Okay, so here we go. Here's a sort of a statue that I saw while I was visiting Mumbai just in last year, sort of inconspicuous corner in this immensely populated city of Mumbai. This beautiful bronze statue of a child sitting atop these books, and it was just so inspirational that I kind of use it in most of my talks now. But it really kind of captures a lot of the kinds of things that motivate me as a medical physicist in this domain. So let's talk about what cancer looks like in a country that looks a lot like Canada, for comparison. So if you were to take a look at, for example, a population with a population of Canada, and compare that to something in another country like Angola, you would find there's a lot of similarities. Our populations are roughly the same. There's a big difference in the area, but there is also a pretty significant difference in the population density. But what does healthcare look like in terms of incidences in these two comparable countries? If you look at statistics of cancer incidence, for example, you'd find that there are some incredible differences in the incidence of cancer and the types of cancer that people get. For example, in Canada, the incidence of breast and prostate cancer are on the top of the list. But in a country like Angola, you have prostate and cervical cancer being on the top of that list. So they have different kinds of cancers that are occurring. And the numbers associated with these are dramatically different. You see 2.6 times more breast cancers, or 2.4 times more breast cancers, for example. And overall, you'll see about 2.7 times more cancers incidence detected in Canada, because we have the infrastructure to detect cancers before they become very serious. And this is reflected in the mortality statistics. If you were to take a look at who dies from cancer, you'll see again a very different story when you compare Canada with a country like Angola. You'll see that a large proportion of people are dying from prostate cancer, something that we regularly treat here in North America and Canada with things like brachytherapy and standard radiation therapy. So we have some real big differences in the mortality and the kinds of cancers that people get between these two very comparable countries. And so here I just show some statistics on the differences in the mortality rates. Even though they may not be substantially different, you have a different spectrum of diseases that people are dying from in these low and middle income countries. In short, overall, I think it's fair to say that we have this global healthcare crisis. And the fact of the matter is that it's not getting any better. If you look at the annualized rate of change in standardized total cancer mortalities over the last 10 years, you'll see that those countries that are in the sort of lighter shades are having a faster rate of cancer mortality than those in the darker shades. And so we have an emerging problem in these largely in a lot of low and middle income countries. And this obviously brings up the need for of trained experts to address the challenges associated with delivering healthcare. There was a really nice paper published in 2015 that looked at the number of linear accelerators that we needed to meet the global need of cancer care. And what we would find is that overall, you would need to add something like 8,541 linear accelerators overall to meet the radiotherapy need. But if you look at those countries, like in low and middle income countries, currently the fleet of linear accelerators is 688. That's 8% of the global need. That means 92% of the population is not there needs to be 92% more linear accelerators to meet the global need of radiation therapy specifically. And so we know that we have this tremendous challenge in front of us. And so what I've been doing is been spending a lot of my time volunteering with different organizations to try to do what we can to help support with the expertise that we have. And in this case, we have groups of medical physicists that want to contribute time and energy into addressing some of these challenges. And so one thing that I'd like to highlight is this volunteer effort that I've had over the last several years, which initially started out with an organization called Medical Physics Without Borders. And so this organization was incorporated in 2015 in the United States and Canada. And some of the history behind it really stems from one of our attendees, Jake Van Dyke, who's on the call, really kickstarted this whole organization. There were a group of initial steering committee members that came up with an idea of establishing a non-for-profit organization to help address some of the needs, major needs in medical physics, to tackle some of these global healthcare challenges. Back in around 2017 or so, we changed the name World Benefit Without Borders to World Benefit, and that's what the organization, the name of the organization is today. Some of the activities that we've been involved in MPWB are listed here. We have a global mentorship program. There's a publication pending on this. We provide grants to support virtual attendance for medical physicists in low and middle income countries to attend things like the AAPM conference, for example. We have a global webinar series that provides multiple choice questions for attendees, and attendees can get certificates, which can be really valuable for those in low and middle income countries. And then we also have this other project called the Open Syllabus Project, which I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about. And so here's the background of this project and an effort that we've been working on for the last several years, which we hope addresses a need in global medical physics education. This is a tool that can be used not just for those in low and middle income countries, but for anybody, including those in the audience, who are striving towards obtaining competency as a clinical medical physicist. Those that are involved in postgraduate medical physics education during a residency would find that obtaining that education can be quite daunting. You're often faced with real life clinical problems, things like, I know everything I need to know about I-25, and I know the details of brachytherapy and how to do calculation, but how do I do the implant itself? And so forth, all sorts of questions that might come across while someone's going through a residency. So what people might do is obviously try to connect with experts within their environment, but they may also want to find some information on the internet. But if you try to Google this kind of content, you'd find that it can be a little bit of a disentangled, a little bit of an uncoordinated globs of information. And while there are some excellent resources and open access resources available, pulling them all together into something that makes sense into the trajectory of a residency program is very difficult to do. And so what we worked on in this MPWB project was to try to tackle this problem, where we identified the core medical physics competencies in a radiation oncology residency program, such as those listed in the IAEA TCF, the 37 report, and link them to HTML, PDF, and open access content that people can peruse and access. And this is the heart of our Open Syllabus project, where we're trying to connect what we've learned with where to get it. And this is what it looks like. This is that TCF 37 report that's broken up into 7 or 8 modules that are listed here. So you have all sorts of things that residents need to learn. And within those, there are lists of core competencies. And what we've done is we've taken those core competencies and learning objectives and linked them directly with open access documents. So if you have your phone handy, I would encourage you to whip it out, go to the QR code, and take a look at the open syllabus. It may be useful for you as trainees in your program to try to collate and collapse and get that information. I'm happy to share this information with you afterwards. This isn't possible with a lot of coordination with a lot of people. And so this kind of demonstrates the real critical value of collaboration amongst people and partners in different organizations. Because achieving equity in healthcare access is a multifaceted thing. you have to look at all sorts of elements when we're talking about achieving healthcare equity. Everything is important. Things from access to care, food safety, personal safety, childcare, elder care, infrastructure, mental health, and so forth. All of these elements are things that we should be thinking about when it comes to coming up with ideas to tackle some of these major global healthcare challenges. And so here are some of those challenges that are listed off with a country like Angola. I mean, how are we supposed to address the challenge of breast cancer if we only have 4 mammography units in a country that has the same population, compared to something on the order of 329 per million person, or 329 mammography units in Canada, and so forth. And another critical part of this conversation has to be working together with NGOs, local governments, and regulatory agencies, and patients in order to achieve these challenges. And this is kind of best demonstrated in some of the challenges in bureaucracy. For example, recent publication and just trying to get food aid into countries like Sudan, which are going a lot of economic and political strife. But you know, while people are donating, while there are infrastructure to donate funds and food and supplies to people, it gets tied up in bureaucracy. So this healthcare, as much as our efforts are to try to improve the quality of life for people that might be going through these kinds of challenges, could face significant hurdles. But by the same token, we can come up with novel, innovative solutions to tackle some of those solutions, such as what is shown here, which is a mobile mammography unit that can go along the countryside and capture a lot and provide access to care for a lot of people in that domain, that region. A couple of really quick points to emphasize here is that I really firmly believe this is that if we are all going to take a part of a medical physics initiative and see, you know, how we might be able to help those in sort of challenging situations, we really have to be mindful of the fact that if we don't respect local, regional, cultural, socioeconomic economic barriers to patient care, we are going to put any of those efforts into risk. So it's really important to keep these things in mind. And my final slide is a takeaway, is just a little bit of suggestions or advice to people is that when some people come up to you and say, hey, are you interested in something? Take those opportunities. I'll tell you now that the reason that I'm so involved in this is that Jake tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, would you like to help us out with the communications team? And I said, sure. And the next thing you know, I'm down this rabbit hole of all of these wonderful projects. So take those opportunities. And another thing that I'd like to really mention here is that the most precious thing that you can give is your time. And if you think about those that are sort of in this space right now, this audience, think about committing 1 hour a week over a 25-year career. That's 650 hours of your life that could be spent to something really important. How much time does it take to do a PhD? It's roughly 500 to about 10,000 hours. So think about that. If you were to spend 1 hour a week volunteering your time and energy to something that has some value like a global initiative, you could do multiple PhDs if you were to commit a couple of hours a week to something like this. And my final comment is that in order to find out what we want to do, it's a matter of trusting yourself and believing that you're gifted in something. And then our challenge in life is to try to find out what that something is. Sorry for taking up a little bit too much of your time, but I hope that helps give some fuel to the fire and gets you motivated to think about different ways that you can help and get involved in global health initiatives. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bastron. That was an amazing talk, very inspiring. So again, we'll have time for questioning at the end of the 3 talks. So I will introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is an experienced professional in radiation oncology and medical physics that impacts global healthcare by providing extensive consultations across Jordan, Syria, Bahrain, Israel, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. As the current chair of the AAPM Global Clinical Education and Training Committee, she is committed to training medical physicists and advancing healthcare practices worldwide. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, Dr. Shada Wadi Ramahi. Doctor, I'll pass over to you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to share my screen right now and hold on. Do you see the speaker's screen or the presentation screen?
The presentation.
The presentation, perfect. All right, so thank you for the introduction, Chloe, and I appreciate the invitation by COMP. And certainly looking into how medical physics is practiced worldwide is something that we need to know as medical physicists. As they say, you know, the world is becoming a smaller or a small village. And Dr. Basran did a wonderful job, you know, shedding light on the challenges that we go through working in, you know, in developing countries. And my talk right now is going to be about my personal perspective as working as a medical physicist in the Middle East. So as a quick introduction, you know, kind of going through 20 years in a few lines here. I've had 16 years of working as a medical physicist in the Middle East in 2 countries. You can see Jordan here highlighted in a darker beige color. And I also worked in Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, I also help with, you know, training other medical physicists in the region, as Chloe mentioned, either as an IAEA expert, where I did multiple training courses, or representing Jordan, or doing my own, you know, training and consultation with the network of medical physics that we created. And I will show you how you can get involved and opportunities also to get involved. And as Dr. Basran said, if you hear opportunities, please do get involved and take, you know, grab the opportunity as well. So what was it like to practice medical physics in the Middle East? You know, we're talking about 16 years. So what do you guys think happens in 16 years? All right. Started my career working with Philips SL75 and Philips SL25 Linux. And probably none of you know, at least the younger generation, that Philips, they made Linux before, you know, there was Elekta. And we had a very old system for water tank called multi-data water tank. And if you look it up, the company doesn't exist anymore. It never got full FDA approval. So finally they told multi-data they cannot produce anything for medical equipment. And kind of the company went down under. Now going from, and by the way, the Philips Linux were so reliable. I will do a Philips Linux anytime. We didn't have MLCs, we just had moving jaws. No IGRT, there's no, you know, MV panel, no CBCT, nothing. You know, monthly QA and annuals were the quickest ever you could find. And so moving forward, you know, things progress. And then I had the opportunity to work with multiple Elekta Linux once Elekta took over from Philips, you know, old news. If you know that, if not, you know, Elekta basically bought out the Philips branch of radiation therapy equipment. And then we went from these 2 with working with the first generation Elekta machines, again, no MLCs, just moving jaws, just single panel for MV instead of films. And that was at that time, like, you know, great. We don't have to put films anymore. You know, that was a great jump to us. And then, of course, we went from the multi-data water tank to something more modern, so to speak, IBA. It used to be called Scanditronics before IBA and Scanditronics, you know, merged together. And then the Elekta Synergy with, you know, full-fledged IGRT capabilities, and very recently with the Elekta Versa HD Linux. Now, coming from an Elekta background into all variant background in the US was kind of a culture shock, to say the least. 2 different vendors. So the question is, how did the team handle all this? I was blessed working with 2 wonderful teams in 2 different countries. And what you need to understand is, yes, it was very challenging, but we worked as a single unit, as a single family, and everyone wanted to be involved. We were fighting to be the person kind of to lead the commission, or to be the person to do this or do that. And we were very inventive as well. And I'll show you examples of how inventive we were. Now, one of the things that helped us, and this is where I really want the current generation also to be involved, is the networks that we cultivated and created outside the region. So every time we had a problem, every time we wanted someone to go through our work, every time we wanted someone to audit our work, we'd send an email. Remember, those were like early 2000s, so social media didn't exist much back then, and email, sorry to say, young generation, was the only method of communication. To give you an example, in 2005, the center I worked at that time went from the Plateau treatment planning system. Plateau doesn't exist anymore, but probably haven't heard of it also, into Pinnacle. And none of us at that time had ever commissioned a planning system. And so it took us months. It really did take us a long time, I think close to 7 or 8 months. And what we did, every time we did something, every time we measured something, every time we entered or tried to model within the Pinnacle environment, I would send an email to the people I know in the US. I'm like, I've done this, I've taken this. Can you double check? Can you go over my measurements? So we cultivated these connections and we made it work. Think of it as virtual auditing, so to speak. And we still have the same connection, but now it has grown more because of the presence of social media. And in the Telegram channel, there's like more than 320 people we have globally. So not talking about only Middle Eastern, we have a global Telegram channel for medical physicists. And we can definitely need more because we ask each other questions. Someone could ask a question, hey, how do I do a breast tangential plan? As simple as that, maybe in your mind, that's very simple, versus, what can I do? How can I write this code, or how do I program something? So how was it working as a medical physicist for 16 years? It was very challenging, to say the least, but also exciting. You get to see, technology progress, and you have your own environment to deal with. So I told you we were resourceful, we were inventive. So what did we do? All right. Well, it's there's a small center in Jordan that wanted to introduce motion management, but at that time didn't know. They had the below built part of the package, but nothing else. They didn't have a moving phantom, or whatever phantom you use for motion management. And so they wanted kind of a show of principle. So what we did, I went out and bought this doll that moves from the local market and strapped it to the belt, and we scanned it. Let me see if this works. Yep. And you could see, there's nothing inside to, there was not, nothing would actually show on the CT scanner. It was empty from the inside unless you put the long window, but at least you could see the moving pattern. And then from there, I had the medical director, I had the installation engineer. I'm like, what, this is what you should expect to do. Now, what we need to, in order to move forward, we need to do this. And we found a volunteer who had the belt strapped in, and we took an image from there, etc. And then we developed the program with them. So be resourceful. Sometimes you just need to go and buy a $5 doll from the market to prove something or show how something works. And if you're thinking anytime in your life, in your professional career, to go and be a trainer in a developing country, you have also to be resourceful. What can I do right now to show them how things should work or how things should look like? Now, another thing, collaborate, right? So my center or my country might not have what I want, but maybe there's a country next door that I can, collaborate with. So the principle of collaboration versus being, neck to neck, or being, going against each other, is also something you'd find in developing countries. And here's really something I'm very proud of. So this other center consulted me to go over the QA practices of their physics team. They were doing a wonderful job. They were doing everything they could do with whatever they had. Now, what I found is that they did not have solid water blocks or some sort of phantom to do their monthly output constancy check. And what they had to do is they had to roll out the water tank every time. And you could imagine the time resources it took from them. So there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but there was so much time needed on something that they can do very quickly. So I know someone who happened to have a 3D printer at home. He's really good at it. At that time he practiced in a different country in the region, but he came to the US and now he's a medical physicist in the US for the last few months. So called him and I said, Ahmad, can you think of what we can do, what we can print, what for the monthly output constancy? And we need different depths for electrons and photons, of course, but we have to have plugs. So if the chamber is in a different location, I can put a plug in and whatnot. And it took back and forth, a few days of kind of designing something, and then he shipped this to us. And he made it so that it fits a 0.6 cc chamber. And now we did kind of commission that, so to speak. So we CT scanned it to see how consistent we have the household units. And you could definitely see the different fill ratios from the 3D printer. Again, this was like a home 3D printer, not very fancy. But it worked. And eventually we kind of baselined it to an annual QA. I figured you guys have the water phantom already there. You have the water tank, you have everything. Let's do a full-fledged TRS 398. And that's the kind of the equivalent of TG51, everywhere else aside of North America. That's what we use for our reference dosimetry. So we kind of did the annual QA, and then we baselined this phantom. So this to show that, if you don't have it in this center, you don't have it in this country, collaborate with someone else. So cultivating network is very important. Now, another thing that I'm also proud of is, well, we have a challenging case, a challenging patient. And this was when I worked in a hospital with resources. However, we didn't have, we don't have all the toys, right? So a patient shows, come to the clinic. We need to use brachytherapy for the patient. However, you could see this maroon red color here. That's the extension of the CTV we had to treat. And what we had at that time, we had a regular ring and tandem. What this patient needed was an applicator with an interstitial capability, something like the Vienna applicator, for example, which we didn't have at that time. So what are we going to do? Clearly one option is to do the regular external beam boost later on, a few weeks later, but that's not optimum. And the physician, an excellent female physician, and underline female physicians because it appreciates the need for a female patient. She said, well, there is a paper that kind of shows proof of concept published, in a European journal. Can we do something like this? And the team said, of course we can. I mean, whatever they do, we can do, right? And what we ended up doing is we ended up commissioning a technique that uses an applicator that's already inserted within the patient to deliver brachytherapy, then use the same applicator while still inserted inside the patient, move the patient immediately to a LINAC room, and use the applicator as an IGRT focus point to diffuse both images, to put patient in the correct position and deliver a tailored SBRT plan. And it took a team of, gosh, we were like 2 physicists from the brachytherapy side, 2 physicists from the SBRT side. So, we were doing the brachytherapy plan. Once we finished and during, plan QA and patient delivery, we pushed the HDR plan to the external beam module. And then we had 2 physicists now working on tailoring this SBRT plan. And that was almost a full day of work. Patient would come in the morning, get her insertion, MR, CT, HDR brachy, etc. And then she had to wait until everything is done And we also did commissioning the QA of the sobriety plan at the same time as well, and then treat her. I am very proud of Saad Adlejan. Dr. Adlejan was a resident at that time, but he really took this and made it his own and actually took off his career as a brachytherapy physicist. Lejan actually graduated from McGill University 2 years ago with focus on brachytherapy QA. And this was the point that made him want to become a brachytherapy physicist. So yeah, just because things are not there, we don't have the fancy tools, it doesn't mean we cannot deliver to the patient. Now, another thing that, again, this was in the same hospital with the resources, right? So money wasn't a question, and we figured, you know what, we need to buy the Vienna applicator for future patients. By the way, we ended up treating 5 patients with this technique. Now, meanwhile, the physician was very smart, again, female physician, love working with her. Why not we create our own, gynae applicators with interstitial capabilities? And we said, yes, let's see if we can do that. And actually, we used the same patient since the patient was waiting. She waited a couple of weeks for us to finish the commissioning because, oops, excuse me. This took, as you could expect, a few weeks to finish the commissioning, right? And you can read details about it in the Brachytherapy Journal published in 2017. Meanwhile, some other group was working with, let's make this a reality. Let's 3D print something. And our hospital at that time, with the resources, had a very expensive 3D printer. And a long story short, we were able to create a custom-made patient-specific vaginal applicator with tracks, needle tracks inside. And we did an end-to-end test, not on a patient, because by that time we already had bought our Venetia applicator. But we did an end-to-end test on a chicken with a disclaimer. Chicken was already dead, so we didn't harm the chicken, just I had to put that disclaimer out. So, how is it practicing medical physics in the Middle East? It was challenging. And you can think of medical physics as being a small analogy of life. You have challenges, you have obstacles. But do I look at them as things that would hinder me, or I look at them as opportunities? And coming from the region and practicing there, I can tell you that people are so willing to go the extra mile. Money has never been an issue. Lack of resources has never been an issue, up to an extent, right? People are so willing to go the extra mile, but they need that push. And this is where all of you come in. And I want to say currently, as part of the AAPM committee, we're working with the chief of physics in Ethiopia at the Black Lion Hospital. He's an imaging physicist. And the guy is so amazing. He actually bought QA phantoms from his own money. And he tried to read, Astro reports and IA reports on imaging QA for his, for the diagnostic machines he has. And then, through different connections, etc., he was able to reach out to AAPM, and now we're helping him, do a proper job. So imagine someone is buying from their own money QA tools for the hospital. And, as Dr. Basran said, 1 hour a week could really make a big difference to someone else. Now, here's something. I had a wonderful opportunity that it's not going to come again. Where early on in my career, I went to MD Anderson and met with Carl Prado. I was of the mentality of, I went there to learn something. So the hospital I worked at that time sent me to MD Anderson to learn a certain procedure. And I was so devastated. We don't have what they have at MD Anderson. We don't have the people, we don't have the tools, we don't have the fancy things. I was putting everything there is to put under the sun of why we cannot do what I was sent to learn. And then I met this wonderful man, may his soul rest in peace. And he heard me, and then he goes, well, what do you have? I said, well, we have this and this. And he goes, what else? I'm like, well, we have something that is not going to work. Well, tell me about it. And he kept on talking to me until he kind of understood everything we had at that time and showed me a way of how we can use it, at least to get started. Maybe not optimum, maybe not American or Canadian optimum, but we were able to start something for our patients. And he said a phrase I still remember until this day. He said, do the best you can with what you have. No one is going to come and fault you for not having the Vienna applicator for your brachy patients. But what do you have that can help? And back in 2007, we did not have much where I worked at, but Carl was able to show me how to use what we have. And it's something I always repeat whenever I meet someone in a developing country and they're asking for help on things. All right, so to wrap up, quickly, if you're interested in opportunities to help, please go to the AAPM International Council and look at the different committees that we have. I represent the Global Clinical Education and Training Committee, and we do cool things. You can look at our committee meeting early in February, and anyone, it's open to public. You can just click on the Zoom link. In addition, if you want to do something on your own, you're sitting, having your nightcap at night, and you want to see if someone needs help somewhere across the board. I can add you to a Telegram group. And at any given time, I just checked it, by the way, before we started. So we have 325 members, and right now, like 23 are active because we cover so many time zones. Someone might send a question to them. It's something they're struggling with, but you could maybe answer while you're, winding down towards the end of the night. No, in order to do that, I have to give you my personal phone number. So please send it to me. You could send it to Jade or Chloe, the request, and I can share my phone number with you at that time. Last but definitely not least, there's so many things to talk about challenges. As a young physicist working in developing countries, as definitely a woman working in developing countries, the region where I worked at, so on and so forth. But I will leave that towards, the panel discussion where we can have a more, destructured talk and discussion, and people can fit in. And ending with introducing Ibn al-Haytham. He's one of the greatest Islamic scholars who was also a physicist. And he did wonderful, he published on so many things, including optics, which precedes Newton's optics book by 700 years. Many people, they credit Newton for many wonderful things that he has done, definitely. But for optics, this Islamic scholar, Ibn al-Haytham, he was the person who actually dissected the eye, knew how it worked, and invented the camera concept. Camera is coming, I know some people have it a Latin word. Camera is also coming from the Arabic word qumra, meaning a dark room. And with this, I say thank you very much and look forward to the speakers panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wadia Hamad. That was an amazing talk, very inspiring and captivating. Very excited for the panel discussion. So now we're at the final speaker. So our final speaker is the co-founder of Global Oncology University. He champions universal access to top-tier education, playing a significant role in reducing global cancer health disparities. Serving as an advisor for the USA government on global health, he actively shapes global health policies and initiatives. He also demonstrates his commitment to global healthcare through publishing 4 books on global oncology with the Institute of Physics and chairing the AAPM Global Needs Assessment Committee. So let's welcome our final speaker, Dr. Wilfred Negouar. Thank you, Doctor. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Chloe. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this wonderful forum. It's always the best thing when we have the younger, let's say, if I permit me to use that word, rising stars or younger generation like you, being involved in global health. And obviously, I want to recognize all the work that the presenters before me, and I'll probably skip through a number of things so that we can have more time for discussion. Yeah, I always like to start with this quote by Albert Einstein, that imagination is more important than knowledge. And I think that that's been my own guide. Being born in a very poor, low resource setting, some of the challenges that Shada shared, facing those, one of the key things that one could only have was the imagination. And so it's always actually an honor to give talks like this and hear the interest of people who want to help, do some things in low and middle income countries, because that inspires me even more to say, okay, if you guys are interested in doing this, what more of me? But when I say imagination is more important than knowledge, I think I could only imagine the opportunity to be able to be here today to talk to you guys, given the circumstances that you grew on. But one thing that, we had growing up in Africa, obviously, is well captured by the Wakanda. The idea that you can have this advanced technological country where everybody can have access to healthcare, healthcare for all. And I think that really drives, is one of the key drivers to global health in general. But when we think about global health, one key thing that we really need to move away from, no matter what I've said, that it's always great to have people come and help low and middle income countries, is that we really need to move away from the global health model of foreign aid, actually really showing that, some of the activities that you do in global health can also be win-win, can also benefit high income countries. And so for me, one of the key things I do with the US government, the Cancer Moonshot program, is really saying, if they're going to establish a very similar program like, President Bush did, PEPFAR, it shouldn't be foreign aid oriented. There has to be some return on investment for the US taxpayer to show how that's benefiting the United States as well. And there are many ways. I'll share a couple of those during this talk. But I want to highlight disparities, which are really the key drivers. I think one is, you can see disparities around race, you can see disparities around gender, you can see disparities around zip code here in the United States. And obviously disparities just in terms of age. And I also want to show that these disparities in the US are also even more, poignant when you look globally. But the goal is that if you can develop in global medical physics or global health solutions that can benefit these low and middle income countries, that they can also benefit high income countries like the United States. One of these examples I saw on the BBC, do US docs have better radiotherapy than Nigerian people? And sadly, the answer to that question is yes. You can see from this map, that's kind of an old IAEA map showing how, the red spots, some countries don't even have access to radiation therapy. And so why do we do global medical physics? I really think we actually need to go beyond just, yes, if you look at equality, equity, and reality, the reality is that, there's this disparity that they showed in the previous maps, where even people who don't have actually in much worse position. But the idea of equity is really good. But what if, in your imagination, and I think that's what you as a younger or rising star medical physicist should think about, is how you can eliminate the barrier. I think that that's really the most important way to achieve healthcare justice and access for everybody. So I'm going to share a couple of challenges in global medical physics, and then I'm going to share a couple of opportunities, and then we can transition into the panel. So one is really around education. I think, Shada already talked about that, and Dr. Basran also talked about that. I think there's great need for, if you really want to make a big difference, the first part is really investing in the human capacity. And, one of the Lancet Oncology Commissions, I think Jake was on that, basically highlight, and many other ones have shown that there's a big need for medical physicists, not only in North America, I mean, globally, especially in lower mid-income countries. And I think that's not only in education, in research, we did an AAPM, so the committee that I chair with the International Council, basically just looking at the research needs for lower mid-income countries. And we see obviously the big one, top one is getting funding and grants, and then obviously equipment and expertise as well. So there's a big need around research. And so one of the solutions and opportunities that has been proposed and is being currently ongoing is really imagine if, which is what I started with, imagine if you could take your cancer center or the hospital where you work in, or the best cancer center, and put that in the cloud, essentially, where people can have access to it from any zip code, from any location. Obviously, that sounds like, you know, we can go down the list and talk about some of the challenges that, you know, would make that not happen. But COVID-19 did teach us that with technology, a lot of these opportunities can actually happen. And so, so what we kind of looked at this is that you can basically think about it as four apps on your iPhone or, you know, Samsung phone or Android. So where you can have a lot of, in care, you can have remote treatment planning and quality assurance support with AI and other technologies, contouring, tumor boards. All of that can be done through technology nowadays. Think about outreach. If you cannot do anything, at least you can advocate. And one of the key things that we started doing was reaching out not just to medical physicists or radiation oncologists or oncologists, but also reaching out to other partners, stakeholders, industry, policymakers, governments, nonprofit organizations, because they are also important stakeholders. Cancer affects everybody. 1 in 3 people in the US, but you know, we all know that you know, these different stakeholders can contribute. And then third, the opportunities around research. You know, I highlight one, which is the point that we talked about. How can you increase access to radiotherapy? So right now, you know, I'm part of leading these multi-center clinical trials that are looking at hypofractionated radiation therapy to increase access. So for prostate cancer, as you know, the time it takes to treat, maybe instead of 39 fractions, bringing that down to 7 means that the time it takes to treat one person, you could probably treat 4 or 5. And that increases a lot of access where you don't have, you know, equipment or infrastructure and stuff like that. Obviously, that was a recommendation during COVID-19. And so that's something we can really scale. Prostate, breast, cervical cancer, all of those things. The clinical trials are important because some of the data that was generated was not generated in low and mid-income country population. So it's really important to, 1, verify that, and then 2, build their capacity to be able to implement that. And then lastly, you talked about the Global Oncology University. So this is something that we really see everybody can contribute in, you know, either in teaching or taking course. And so the model really there is that if you can think about giving all the online, if you just have 1 hour, you know, I know Dr. Basran talked about, you know, 1 hour a week, but you can actually contribute 1 hour a month or 1 hour in 6 months. So we've seen that we can take people to teach classes online, virtually. You have a whole curriculum. And then the practical component of that course, or that program is actually conducted in partner sites in different lower mid-income countries. So they don't have to travel to Canada or to the United States. And so this has been very successful. Right now, we see a lot of advantages there. So if you want to teach or you want to be a peer mentor, or you want to sit in and listen to one of these, you're definitely welcome. Some of this is being also implemented in collaboration with the education committees of the AAPM, the other partner of Shader with Stephen Avery as well. That's why I stole this slide from him, University of Pennsylvania. But one of the key things is that you can harmonize education, you can overcome geographic barriers. There's no tuition for the students, so everybody has access. Talk about brain drain, diaspora can contribute, so that really turns that into circulation. And through this, we'll be able to train thousands of oncology health professionals already. there are always opportunities for you to join, to learn and listen in, or learn with other people in other parts of the world. Or if you want to teach something, you know, you can contribute 1 hour of your time or 2 hours a week in a month or 6 months even. And so everybody can, it's a really good opportunity for people to help in capacity building. And the last thing I'm just going to talk about is also research, since I highlighted it as a challenge. So one of the things that we did with the AAPM is that we got funding from the American Institute of Physics to create these micro grants that kind of seed collaborative research. But the idea is that you can have a high income country mentor and a low and mid income country mentor. They can collaborate. And then, or if you are, you know, if you're a medical physicist, young person, you can apply for these grants and you can have an experience abroad in global setting where you have co-mentors from your local institution and the one in low and mid income countries. So these are opportunities. It's been very successful, and we are expecting another $1.5 million in funding to start in April. So there'll be many opportunities around this where you can really work with another low and mid income country faculty or peer, you know, to do something in global health. But that can really be win-win, because we actually get people in the US getting credits. They're doing PhDs on this. So I'm just going to end by saying that, you know, the key thing is collaboration. Collaboration is really key. And one of the African sayings captures that really well. If you want to go fast, you have to go alone. You can go alone, but if you want to go far, you have to go together. Global health really involves collaboration. And so, you know, as you imagine what you want to do, think about, you know, how you can collaborate with other people. So thank you for your attention. Have any questions?
Thank you so much for sharing. That was excellent. Okay, now we're going to move into the panelist type portion of this session. So for this, if anybody has any questions, you can either drop them in the chat, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you, or you can put them in the Q&A. Either way, we'll make sure your questions get asked. On that note, why don't we start with one of the questions from the chat, which was directed at Chada, and says, can you shed some light about the process of accreditation and certification of international physicists, specifically in the Middle East and North Africa?
Yes, thank you, Habib, for the question. It is actually one of the biggest challenges we face working in the Middle East and North Africa, a region that's called MENA. And maybe you know, Will can tell us about the other parts of Africa, because I am ignorant about that. But the fact is, medical physics as a profession and medical physicists are not regarded as such, meaning as a profession, in many countries. For example, in Jordan, the official title of physicists are technicians. So we're treated as, you know, like your therapists, or maybe lab technicians or pharmacy technicians. And this really reflects on the compensation you get, your value within the hospital, your career ladder, etc. If you're lucky to work within a private institution or not an NGO hospital, then you would be treated differently, because definitely private institutions, they know the different values, especially if they go into establishing a radiation oncology department. But they would still take advantage of, you know, officially you're not a physicist, so they can definitely play around, and you know, your compensation as a physicist is not as much. So not only that, it affects our ability to get officially, you know, continuing medical education. I do remember back in 2006 when I was ABR certified, my chairman said, "What am I going to do with that? What is that going to do for me, for us?" So the value, if you're treated as a therapist or as a technician, then the value of what you're contributing in the background in people's minds is diminished. Now, if any of you have heard of the International Medical Physics Certification Board, IMPCB, you know, Google it, look it up. It started as an initiative, and I know within the group here we have Dr. Mustafa from Yale. Maybe he could, you know, say something further about this. It started as an initiative between IAEA, I believe, and the International Medical Physics Organization. And I do believe they started their first exam in 2017 or something like that. And now they are certifying medical physicists in very similar fashion to ABR certification. So you have written exams and you have oral exam. However, not all countries still realize that or accept that. Some countries are exceptions, but not all countries. And having our profession being recognized is really one of the biggest challenges that we're trying, to push forward in different countries. I hope I answered your question, Habib.
Thank you for that. We'll switch to the raised hand. So Salman Hamadi, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello. Yes. Hi, everyone. This is just a follow-up to the same question Habib asked to Shada, or anyone else was interested to answer. So, yes, so you mentioned all that, but I was wondering, here in the US, we have a very, I'd say, regulated way of education. You go through graduate school, then you go through residency, and then you get certified. So I am wondering, back in the Middle East, are residencies regulated? How can we find residencies in the Middle East and then go on to do board certification? So is there a formal way to do all that, or is it just, train on the site and then get certified by the international board?
So your question assumes we have residencies and we don't.
Yeah, that's why I was on to ask.
Disclaimer, in one country, there's residency, as far as I know. In medical physics, there is one residency program in Saudi Arabia. I don't know about other countries, especially North Africa. I don't know how they have that. But in the Middle East itself, we don't. Most of the people, actually, they have a bachelor degree in medical physics, because we have a lot of universities that graduate medical physicists in a bachelor degree. And then they find a job and they get trained on site. And for the IMPCB, that's accepted if you have a degree that satisfies your physics, your calculus, math, etc. Maybe you take anatomy. No, I'm sorry, and Adel, probably you're the best person to answer. I think for IMPCP, you have to have a master's as a minimum level with the required prerequisites. And then to have worked in a hospital for a minimum number of years, and then you can go get your certification from IMPCP. However, remember, a lot of countries still struggle with what I'm going to do with your certificate. What's the value of the certificate? So it's something that you have to do for you, right? And something that you have to believe in doing, because that requires time and money investment from your side. And of course, we have to do a lot of push to change the mentality and definitely how things are identified in our countries back home.
Thank you.
This is a follow-up question. Thank you, Shada, for the wonderful presentation, and everyone. Regarding the requirement for a master degree for the IMCP, does the master degree has to be from accredited program or any master degree?
I'm hoping Adel will step in. From what I know, no, any master's degree, because again, the concept of accreditation doesn't necessarily, as you know it here in the US or Canada, in North America, doesn't carry outside. As long as it's an accredited program in its own country, so the university, the Ministry of Education accredits this program for graduate degree in medical physics, and the requisite courses, so they look at, I think, calculus, they look at advanced physics, etc. Then that would suffice to get you through exam number one, register for exam number one. I don't want to put Adel on the spot. Oh, I see, Adel, you turned on your, I guess there's interest in IMPCP. I yield the floor to you.
Well, thank you. And I can see the interest there as well, but great and excellent presentations by the team here. And as far as MPCP is concerned, as Shada mentioned, this is a program that we started working on about like 2012 or so, more than 10 years ago. And eventually by 2017, it bear fruits and we were able to conduct the first exam in a way similar to what the ABR is doing. Not really exact, but in trying to get some standards that we check and test the candidates for. The purpose, in fact, of MPCP was not really to examine and to issue certification. The purpose was really to help countries develop their own education and training programs so they can be accredited by MPCP. So we have a path for those countries to develop their training programs or residencies. And so once they reach certain level or certain requirements that are put by MPCP, we either go to the country, most of the time we go to the country, visit, see the places, check the setup there in terms of their faculties, students, as well as the facilities they have in there. And probably they take about 1.5 years, 2 years to figure out if we can really accredit that particular place or not, or of course, give them some kind of recommendations. But the fact that that in itself is a difficulty due to lack of resources in those countries, because the requirements really have to have certain number of trained medical physicists to train other physicists. And the fact that you don't have that many number of qualified medical physicists in those countries, we found the other path, which is an additional path, to say that we will do the exams and we will conduct those exams, part 1 and part 2, and the oral exam as well, which is part 3. And the requirements for part 1, general physics, master degree in general physics, physical sciences, engineering from a recognized university within your country or any other country for that matter. But then part 2 will have really to have the specialty. You have to have training in the specialty of interest, be it radiation therapy physics, diagnostic, or nuclear medicine. Those are the 3 areas we are examining at this point. It's been working fine, and hoping that with time we'll be able to develop enough certified medical physicists in sufficient number of countries. So those group of people who are going hopefully to follow the standards of radiation therapy treatment and management, so as diagnostic and nuclear medicine, should be able to put some kind of plans for their own future training and certification programs within their countries. That's really the main objective to achieve. We have so far examined probably about, let's say, maybe 260 from different parts of the world, from the Middle East to South America to Asia and some part of Europe as well. And there's probably about, I would say, 46 or 47 who are fully board certified by now. So if you have any questions or more details, we have our site in there, impcp.org, and there you can find additional information. So I hope that I answered the question, but then I have also a question to Dr. Bazran. You mentioned that you have some kind of you put some kind of a curriculum or suggestions for running a residency program. So are you aware of any particular country in some of those countries that you have visited or you are in touch with that they currently are working on developing or already have a residency program?
For residencies, I can't specifically comment. One thing that I should clarify about the Open Syllabus project, this particular website is engineered to provide access to content specifically. It's not engineered to act as a means for delivering the didactic content one typically goes through or has to go through when they when they're going through a residency program. The IAEA TC37 syllabus is a very comprehensive list of all of the things that clinical competent medical physicists should be aware of, with a variety of reading lists. And so all we're really trying to do in this case is to provide an educational tool of something that people can reference so that when they have to encounter brachytherapy for the first time in their center, and they're unsure of, what sort of global standards there might be, if there are some global documents. For example, like the ASTRO radiation oncology treatment guidelines is an excellent spot for getting global information about basic standards for breast radiotherapy or for prostate cancer treatments and so forth. So we would provide within that syllabus, there would be a line item that says, have basic knowledge of, dose per fractions for major treatment sites and so forth. And so we would just provide a link for that. But just to be clear, we're not in our goal is not to create a sort of a checkbox of things that residents have to go through, but to provide a comprehensive educational tool that anyone around the world can access. I wanted to also make a couple of really quick points following up on the previous discussion, in the sense that there are a couple of other ways that residents and can sort of get into clinical practice a little bit faster. FAMPO, the African Organization of Medical Physics, have something along the lines of an expedited program where you can get a lot of the didactic content from the graduate training programs, coupled with the kinds of things that you need to do in a residency. So it's kind of an abridged program that allows you people that can get trained very quickly and start working right away. There's that program that's underway. And then there's also the ICTP initiative, which where there are effectively, it's a school, a training school where students receive a lot of the didactic content that you get from a graduate training program, but then have a year where they're seconded to an institution in Italy. That's where the ICTP headquarters are, where they can undertake actual clinical medical physics, and then take that knowledge back to the countries that they've come from. So it's a longer term type of program, but there are a variety of ways of sort of bridging the gap between, didactic graduate educational content and boots on the ground residency work to become a competent medical physicist.
Thank you,
when in
Dr.
fact,
Basman. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't mean to take a lot of time, but just really a comment about ICTP. We do actually collaborate with ICTP. And in the past, before COVID, we traveled during the time when they just finished their master's degree to Trieste there. And we examined their candidate. They just put their candidates for IMPCP test, and we go through the process. Nowadays, we are doing the same, but we are doing it on Zoom, and it's working very well. So these are kind of a large group of candidates usually take our exam.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a really interesting model of sort of bridging the gap. And we're MPWB has started some discussions on pursuing something along those lines in South America. It may not consist of a heavily didactic component, but it may be more focused towards the clinical residency side of things, or finding a way to leverage the dollar, the US dollar, in places in South America, where instead of spending the amount of money needed to train a resident in North America, training one resident in North America, you could potentially train 3 or 4 down in other places in South America. And so that might be an efficient way for people to get super high quality training, access to great state-of-the-art equipment for their clinical residency programs, but be able to take that back to developing and low and middle income countries. So that's another idea that we're currently exploring.
Perfect. So I'll just follow up with the question we had in the chat. A question to Will from Abid. Is there any platform to help train international physicists on treatment planning?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Yes, we have actually offered that through the Global Oncology University, but that was really focused on hypofractionation. So we looked at case studies for prostate, breast, and cervical cancer, to help with the treatment planning, and trained. We actually ran a competition at the end of that where there was awards given to the best planners. So that's an opportunity, but we normally do that. That was done specifically because we had a needs assessment, we realized that for countries in low and middle income countries to actually implement hypofractionation, there needed to be some additional training for these medical physicists. So that was really derived from a need rather than an ongoing program that anybody can attend at any time. So that's usually the way that's the one I'm aware of that has happened. So if you're interested in that, definitely let me know. I'm sure that there are other opportunities coming up.
Thank you. This is Habib Salah again. Also, what I was going to ask more is there any access to the treatment planning system where international physicists could practice cases where also other trainers could use to train international medical physicists? Because as you know, one of the biggest challenges having access to treatment planning system. In the past, in this country, we were able to get license from Varian, Brella, Pinnacles through student grant. You get a license to train a student. Is there something like this? Is there any effort to maybe get licenses to use for a student to have, it would be say Eclipse with give people account to practice, and for teacher also to use to teach international student?
Yeah, in the one that we did, basically people will upload the plans, download the plans and do that in their own clinics and then upload the results back. So I'm not aware currently of a platform that offers that kind of free software. I would say that in terms of contouring, there are many options. Elector, for example, with Prono allows you, you can actually, it's vendor neutral. So basically you can actually practice things there, you can get scored and you can really build your knowledge. But I'm not aware of, one way you can have access to for free to do treatment planning. Maybe the other people know.
Well, I'm just reminded of this initiative that was started back in the late 80s of North Carolina. George Strauss's Plunk radiotherapy platform. It was called Gratis, actually. It was a free open access software that people could use to do virtual simulation. It was one of the it was an extremely powerful tool, and it's still used in some instances for some training and education. And it would be really wonderful to have sort of a revitalization or resurgence of sort of open access educational tools like this. But by the same token, I think when the rubber hits the road in a lot of clinics, you're generally going to be purchasing some kind of commercial product, and you want to have familiarity with working with that product and that version of the product, and knowing what kinds of treatments you're going to be starting, with once you get the keys to the LINAC. And that's always a bit challenging to figure out, right? All of those pieces have to be in place, figuring out what you're treating, what you're planning to treat, knowing what your versions of software is, having the infrastructure to get access to that software. These are very difficult challenges to tackle.
Thank you.
Thank you for those awesome answers, everyone, and providing all this information about all the different initiatives out there. I have a question of my own. I was thinking there's lots of graduate students in attendance today, and there's such a push towards this cutting edge technology when we do our research. But I was wondering how you guys envision balancing the pursuit of this cutting edge technology in medical physics with the ethical responsibility of ensuring equitable access to these innovations.
I can start if no one is taking the question. By equitable access, you mean with physicists from parts other than North America, is that correct?
Yeah, looking at things like proton therapy that can be extraordinarily expensive, and how we make sure that everyone has access to the best technologies, or how we deal with that.
So I just want to say that radiotherapy existed long before we have all these cool technologies and these cool phantoms and tools, etc. It's really a privilege to be able to work in such an institution with proton therapy, or maybe you have your own, MR-Linac, all these cutting edge technologies, as you mentioned it. And that's really good for a medical physicist. But I would say if you want to have equitable access, you need to make sure to have your expertise translate into how you can help someone who's struggling to do something in their own country. I don't look at it as equitable in terms of access to technology, Jade. To me, equitable is patient care. A breast patient, and I say breast patient because that's the most common cancer disease in women, regardless where women are on this earth. A breast patient should have, the same management, radiation therapy wise, and medical physics and planning, whether she is in North America or she's in, somewhere far away, thousands of miles away, or kilometers. This is Canada, right? I can use kilometers. And so the end line is patience. When we went that extra mile, we didn't go the extra mile because we didn't have the tools or we were crying. And that's what Carl Prado actually taught me. It's, what is your end result? When you're graduating from medical physics, you have a PhD, you want to do this and do that. I'm like, well, I want to have the best of everything. That was the wrong answer. Carl showed me the way. It's like, no, you're patient. So equitable to me, at least having worked for 16 years in the Middle East, it is having someone to help me. And I was so lucky to have many people who helped me along that path. How to give my patients the best care. So always put the end result in your mind. That's your patient care. Protons might have a slight edge, for example, over photon therapy in breast. It might have a slight edge for pediatric patients. But what can you do to help those patients who are getting treated with photon therapy, let's say in Jordan or Syria or Egypt or Tunisia? So I look at it as equitable in care to the patient.
Yeah, that's really important. I just want to add that actually recently we published, to your proton question, there's a published paper in the Lancet about democratizing proton therapy. And this is really a fascinating paper. It's actually driven by Thomas Botfeld at MGH and Jan Susu there. And one of the key things is basically showing that, and I think that this is kind of consistent with what the National Cancer Institute Center for Global Health in the US, they've had a number of programs that are low cost innovations for global health, where you really want to make sure that you build in equity of access to it. And I think that that's really the win-win example, where you develop that technology. Low cost doesn't mean low quality, but really such that it can benefit low resource settings, but you can also use that in the US. It's really where they can invest in that. But there's a return on investment for United States because that becomes also accessible in the United States. And so out of that initiative, there were a number of tools that came out. I will give you an example. So Lawrence Squad at MD Anderson actually got one of those grants, developed the AI for contouring cervical cancer, which is really now a tool that they are offering for sites across Africa and also in the US. You can use that tool. Another one was Eric Ford developing the LINAC with compensators that, is kind of ongoing project. So I actually really like your question because nowadays, as people invest into providing funding for research in global health, it's really important that that equity piece be built into that.
Yeah, just to add on that conversation, I encourage you to check out Delft Industries. So this is a company that built a deep learning system that takes in X-ray images that are from a portable X-ray unit that fits inside a truck. And what it does is it detects tuberculosis. This is a basic thing that we, you want to detect in very rural communities in low and middle income countries. And the deep learning system, you get a lineup of people coming from the community. They get a quick X-ray scan. The deep learning system spits out a result. And if there's anything suspicious, they just go around the back of the truck and they do a sputum sample, and then they can get results of whether they have tuberculosis or not. That's true innovation, like it's merging simple imaging technology with modern AI systems to tackle a really important global healthcare need. A similar system was developed to check for the orientation of children pregnancy or during pregnancy, checking the position of the baby prior to its birth, because that's one of the biggest challenges associated with childbirthing in these low and middle income countries. And so instead of having really expensive ultrasound equipment, a company had developed a very simple tool where basically you just do one quick scan in one direction and another scan perpendicular to it, and then it builds using an AI algorithm. It can determine the position and orientation of the child just before they're going to get, before birth. Again, tremendously important stuff, that's really simple technology, purely innovative. And it's these kinds of things that I think are, ripe for the picking, and I think potentially wonderful opportunities to make a real impact in communities, not just in low and middle income countries, but those are technologies you mentioned that can be used in anywhere.
Thank you for such exceptional answers. Those were excellent. Thank you.
So it's now near 2:30, so we'll have to close this seminar. But I want to thank all of you for joining us virtually, and especially a big thanks to our three speakers that shared their incredibly insightful path and that shared the incredible story with us today. So we're very thankful that you could join us. If you have any other question, you can direct them to me and Jade, and we'll try to lead them to our speakers. And I don't know if I'm forgetting something to say, Jade. Should I? Oh,
No,
we'll
that's-
just show maybe this poster for the next session for C3. So we have a seminar coming in February on entrepreneurship.
I don't think I have that available right now, but that will be available on all social media very soon. So we look forward to seeing many of you there as well.